Thingvellir National Park. The Golden Circle in Iceland is a must-to-visit and full of stunning natural sights. It's made up of Thingvellir National Park, which will be in this video, Gullfoss Waterfall, and geyser geothermal areas, which will be in subsequent videos. I believe, but don't quote me on this one, that it took about an hour and a half to drive from Reykjavik to Thingvellir National Park. I know it's about 40 kilometers from Reykjavik. I would say that our tour guide was quite good at filling time along the way and explaining some insights about such a stunningly beautiful country. For me, when I look at Iceland, I see a cross between the Arctic with minimal vegetation and a volcanic country, mountainous, beautiful dark rock. One interesting fact for tree huggers is that Iceland doesn't have a lot of trees, and the government is paying farmers to grow trees. Now, this picture shows a good number of trees, but being upward in the Arctic zone, you don't really expect much trees or abundant vegetation. This little church in the distance introduced me to Icelandic tales, which seem to be full of trolls and can get pretty grim very fast. Apparently, this church was home to a very successful Viking. And when this Viking decided to retire, he came home and he decided he would throw his treasures onto the property and see people fight to get it. Nice guy, he liked seeing people fight. His daughter wouldn't allow it. When he came close to dying, he decided to bury his treasure in a secret place, and he got 2 of his servants to help him. Once he buried the treasure, he killed the servants to make sure they wouldn't get the treasure, and the next day he died. Apparently, he was always a handful and had a drinking problem even at the age of 3 years old. Pretty young, in my opinion. He also killed a man at the age of 6, which is unbelievable. And what's even more unbelievable, his mom praised him for his actions of killing the man by saying, "You have the makings of a good Viking." And that was my stunned introduction to these tales. We arrived at Thingvellir National Park, also called Thingvellir, and the building at the front is the entrance, which has a small gift shop and, of course, information about the park. Besides being the first national park in Iceland, there are a few reasons why Thingvellir is important. One of them is it was an open-air governmental assembly for Iceland, which was established in 930 AD. Now, when you look at this beautiful spot, it seems strange to put an assembly here, or at least in my mind it seems a bit strange. There are waterfalls. This is a place where you can see 2 continents at the same time, since it is where the Eurasian and the North American plates meet, and that particular spot is closer to when you're driving out of the park. Well, the reason for it being an assembly is, of course, answered through the history. When the first settlers came to Iceland, there were very scarce resources such as food, and this caused friction among the different clans and sometimes violence. In terms of the picture we can see here, one thing to point out is the first stream flowing into a lake. You can walk down some steps to get a closer look, or if you don't want to walk down, I guess it's about 40 or 50 steps, you can take a picture from above, which is also a pretty nice view. Now, in terms of history, the first settlers tried to control the population since they believed the land could only sustain 50,000 people. peat moss, like what we see in the picture on these stones, covered most of the land, and the only natural fruit were blueberries. You probably also heard of some interesting historical dishes such as rotting or fermented shark, which I did not try. Population control was a key issue, and scarcity in terms of food, wood, these were legitimate concerns. Now, in terms of the picture, we can see there are several connecting bridges in the park, and this allows you to basically walk to all the various sites, which to me, I'm sure you could spend hours in this park if you wanted to. And just a beautiful, beautiful sight. As the first settlers came, they formed regional assemblies, and the first was claimed by the first settler called Thingvellir National, and it was said he came from Norway and settled in Reykjavik, and his descendants ended up being the most prosperous. However, for all the national or regional assemblies to meet and agree on the law, they needed to have a common spot. And they gave this job to a feller called Grimmer Getskor, who was tasked with the job of finding a location. And to me, it sounds like a job that could easily make some folks complain about the decision. Now, back to the grim tales. It just so happened a man convicted of murder was forced to turn over his property to the public, and this land became known as Thingvellir or Thingvellir, which eventually became the national park that we're talking about now. The parliament was founded around 930 AD and assembled each summer until the end of the Old Commonwealth in the 13th century. After that, it functioned as a court of law until 1789. Now, just some other important events that happened here included the adoption of Christianity around 1000 AD and the foundation of the modern Icelandic Republic in 1944. So this spot is very key in terms of Iceland's history. Since 1930, Thingvellir has been a national park, and in 2004, it was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Besides being such a key historical site, Thingvellir has a unique environment. So we find Iceland's largest natural lake, and it is on the junction of two tectonic plates on the mid-Atlantic ridge. So why did they choose Thingvellir? Besides getting the land for free from a murderer, these plains were accessible from all main cross-country routes. So even the furthest away could ride for 2 weeks to get there. It also contained plenty of firewood and drinking water for the assembly. Now, I always take pictures of signs. This national park is really large. On my tour, we had about an hour to explore the park and meet at parking lot P2, so I made sure I didn't pass it. And I am sure you could spend half a day or more in this park. I came in late February and the weather was pretty rainy. I got a bit soaked for the first 10 minutes when arriving, and luckily the heavy downpour passed. So how do you dress for late February? If you're coming from a country or place with snow, you probably don't need to buy too much stuff. You will have a hat, light winter gloves, a coat that is fairly waterproof, and boots. I was fine with my regular winter jacket, but I think if you are buying the stuff, it would be better to take a lighter winter jacket, such as a down or a very heavy fleece, and wear a waterproof, windproof jacket over it. And you can also, I've seen this, I've actually had some of these where the light winter jacket and a waterproof, windproof shield are combined. So you can also get those combined where you can zip them apart. And I was very happy. I walked with my waterproof pants and put it over my jeans, or they would have been soaked more than a few times on this trip. As for the umbrella, forget about an umbrella. It will just break in the wind. The wind is very, very strong. The park is also good for a really self-guided experience. There are plenty of signs explaining the sights and the history, so if you want to really learn more about what you're looking at, there is no problems doing so. So this wraps up Thingvellir National Park, one of the sites in the Golden Circle.